Hello, grade 8s. Here's your next lesson on solving equations. Just before the break, we practiced the distributive property. So that skill is going to be needed for today. So we want to solve equations that have brackets in them. Okay, and that means we have to remove the bracket first. So we used the distributive property. And in the distributive property, you multiply to remove the brackets. And then you look at what you've got and you want to add any like terms. That's not always possible, but we need to look for that. Let's go through the first example I've set out here. So we have 3 in front of the bracket, and that 3 is going to multiply both terms inside of the bracket. So the 3 is going to multiply the 4x. So 3 times 4 is 12. And there's no x to multiply any other x there, so we just have x. That 3 will then multiply the next term. And 3 times 2 is 6. Now those have to be connected by either a positive or a negative sign, and that will be determined by the sign of what we're multiplying. So this has the invisible positive times this positive, because the sign in front goes with the term. So a positive times a positive is going to give us a positive, so that's going to be plus 6. Now, 12x and positive 6 are not like terms. An x term and a number can't go together, so that is, in fact, the final answer. Let's look at the second example. In the second example, we have 2 brackets to remove. So we'll start again with the first bracket. 2 times 2x is going to give us 4x. The 2 times not just 3 now, but negative 3, because the sign in front belongs to the term that follows. So 2 times 3 is 6. And a positive times a negative gives us a negative. So that's going to be a subtract 6. All right, we move on to the second bracket. Remember, the sign in front belongs to the term that follows. So this is negative 5, which is going to multiply the x. So 5 times x is 5x. A negative times a positive gives us a negative. Move on to the second term. 5 times 3 is 15, and a negative times a positive is a negative. So now we have 4 terms, and we're looking for like terms. We want to put them in descending order, so we're going to use our terms first, our x terms first. So we have 4x, and again, use the sign in front, negative 5x. So 4 added to negative 5 gives us negative 1x's. You could also just write that as negative x. Either of those is acceptable. Okay, I'll cross those off so we know we dealt with them. And now we're going to put numbers with numbers. So negative 6 and negative 15. Thinking temperature always when we add together. So cold added to more cold is going to give us colder. So that's going to be negative 21. So negative 1x minus 21 or just negative x minus 21 is the answer to the distribution there. Okay, now we want to use that skill in solving equations. Okay, so I want to go back and just review all of the rules with you. Okay, so if we look at an equation, the first thing, doesn't matter what equation you're going to have, you want to remove any brackets, okay? And you do that simply by multiplying, just like we practiced. Then you're going to add like terms, and again, we just practiced that into distribution. So those are the 2 skills that we're looking to do first if we have a bracket. Then we need to continue to solve, so we're going to move the variables to the left. So variables have to go to the left. At this stage, flipping will still work. Then we're going to remove the add and subtract number. Remember, we're using opposites. So if it's an add in the question, we're going to use a subtract. If it's a subtract, then we're going to use an add. The next step is to remove any multiply or divide numbers, and again we're going to use opposites. So if there's a multiply, we're going to use a fraction line to show divide, say dividing by 4. If there is a divide, we're going to multiply, and we're going to practice using brackets, okay, not our times symbol. That means then that we will be at the stage where we've solved. And again, I'm going to give you some questions to check. So remember, rewrite, substitute, calculate, compare. Left side should equal the right side if your solution is correct. All right, let's move on to our first example. Simple one, okay? We need to remove the bracket. So simply multiplying 2 times x gives us 2x. 2 times positive 1 gives us positive 2. Now remember, the 2 only multiplies what's in the bracket, so it's not going to multiply the equals 6, so we're just going to write that down. Now, there are no like terms to gather. Remember, when we're gathering like terms, we're just looking at left side. So left side has an x and a number, so nothing alike there. Right side is just a number. The next then is to make sure the variable is on the left, which it is. Now we need to remove the add or subtract number. Because this has an add to, we're going to subtract 2 to get rid of it. Okay, remember, the objective is to get x all by itself, so we want to get rid of all the other numbers next to it. Now, in an equation, to keep it equal, if we subtract 2 from the left, we have to subtract 2 from the right. Now, adding 2 and subtracting 2 becomes a 0. So now, if we bring down what is left, there's just 2x on the left, and we have 6 subtract 2, which is 4 on the right. Now, our last step is going to be to get rid of the 2 that is in fact multiplying the x. So if we have a multiply by 2, we're going to remove it by divide, which is the opposite of multiply, and use exactly the same number. Positive 2 is multiplying, so we're going to divide by positive 2. You must do the same thing to the left and the right, so we'll divide the right by 2. This allows us to isolate the variable because 2 divides by 2 to give you 1, and 1x is the same thing as x. X is now all by itself. On the right-hand side, we have 4 divided by 2, which is 2. We've solved it. All right, now we want to check the equation. Okay, so when we check, we're going to start with the original equation. I'm just going to rewrite it out. So 2x plus 1, whoops, we have to put this in a bracket, is equal to 6. There we have the identical equation. Now what we're going to do is not use the steps for solving. We're just going to check using BEDMAS. Okay? So we're going to substitute our answer in. So 2 bracket. Take the 2 and put it in where the x is. So we're going to have a 2 there plus 1 in our bracket. And now using BEDMAS, we need to do what's in brackets first. So we're going to add those numbers in the bracket. So 2 plus 1 gives us 3. And then we're going to finish this off by multiplying. 2 times the bracket gives us 6 on the left. And we have 6 on the right. We compare, and the 6 on the left equaling the 6 on the right means that our answer is in fact correct. Okay, so we wrote down the equation, we substituted in the answer, we started to calculate using BEDMAS, and then eventually we compared that the left equaled the right. Okay. Let's move on to a more complicated question. The tricky part with this one is the bracket is not sitting at the front. It doesn't have to. We just have to remember to multiply what's in front of the bracket by both terms. So what do we have in front? Remember, the sign belongs to the number. So we have a -2 multiplying our x. So a negative times a positive is a negative, and 2 times x is 2x. Move on to the next part to multiply. A -2 times a +1. 2 times 1 is 2, and a negative times a positive is a negative. So we've expanded the bracket. Just bring down everything else. So the 48 sits at the front, and then an equals 50 is at the back. Now the next step is to add any like terms. So on the left side, there's a plain number and a plain number. Those need to be put together. Now, some of you, if you feel like you like the traditional X group in front, because that's how we see it most often, then write it that way, okay? So we'll put our 2x in the front. In fact, the negative sign belongs with it, so it's going to be -2x. And then we're going to put these two pieces together. So 48 has that invisible positive, so that's like a hot, and added to -2, that's a cold. It's going to cool down the 48, so we're going to end up with +46. Okay, and just bring down the equals 50. So we've expanded brackets, we have added like terms. Now we know we need to get x all by itself, so we need to get rid of the 48 and the -2. Get rid of the add and subtract first. So if this is an add 46, we're going to subtract 46. Remember, both sides. The add 46 and subtract 46 becomes a 0. Bring down what we have left. So -2x is left is equal to, now put together these two numbers, hot 50, cold 46. So in fact, to get that answer easily, you're going to subtract, and you're going to have more hot than you do cold. Remember, that hot is going to be cooled down by 46. So we're going to end up at +4. The last step is to get rid of this -2. So we're going to divide to get rid of the -2, that is multiplying the x. Use exactly the same number. Don't change the sign of the number, just change the operation. That was a multiply by -2, so we're going to divide by -2. Same thing on the right-hand side, divide by -2. -2 divides by -2 to give you 1. We've got our x all by itself, and 4 divided by -2 gives us -2. We've solved it. Okay, let's move on to a third example. Just a few more negative signs in here, which students often find more difficult, right? So I've thrown this one in as an example. Same way to start, multiply the number in front by everything inside the bracket. Keeping track of the signs. So a negative times a positive is a negative, and 5 times 1 is 5. Move to the next term in the bracket. A negative times a negative is going to give us a positive, and 5 times x is 5x. Now, the -5 is not going to multiply the 8, or in fact the -8, because it's not inside the bracket. So we'll just copy it down. So those just come straight down. -8 is equal to -18. All right, the next step is to add any like terms. Now, most of you like the x group to go first. You don't have to, so we'll start with that. There's only one x group, so we'll put 5x first. You can put the plus in front, but you don't need to, right? The invisible no sign means positive. Now we're going to put together the -5 and the -8. Cold added to more cold means it's going to get colder. So colder being negative, and 5 and 8 gives us 13. Cross those off, and it's going to equal -18. Now, our variable is on the left, so we don't have to worry about flipping. We have to get rid of the 13 and the 5. Well, in fact, it's -13. We get rid of the add number first, or the subtract number. So we're going to do the opposite of subtract 13. We're going to add 13. That means same to the right, add 13. This becomes a 0. Let's copy down what's left. On the left side, 5x. On the right, cold 18, hot 13. Okay? So now cold is going to get warmed up by 13. We've got more cold, so our answer is going to be cold. And we get, in fact, -5. Now, got to get rid of the 5 timesing the x, so we do the opposite of times, which is divide. So we're going to divide by 5 on both sides. 5 divides by 5 to give us 1x. We got our x all by itself. 5 divided by 5 is 1. A negative divided by a positive is a negative. So our answer is -1. X equals -1. All right. One last one. It's going to be more complicated because, in fact, we have 2 brackets to remove. And there's a little tricky bit here that we're going to have some students maybe struggle with when they see a first example like this. So I want to do one of these. So let's look at the 2 brackets that we're going to expand here. So we've got a 2 that's going to multiply those 2 terms, and then we've got nothing in front here. So remember, there's always an invisible 1 in front of any number multiplying it. So in fact, we're going to have a -1 here that's going to multiply those 2 terms. All right, let's start the multiplying. 2 times 2x is 4x. 2 times -3 is -6. Moving to the second bracket, -1 times x, well, a negative times a positive is a negative, and 1 times x is x, or 1x. You can write either. Moving on to the next part of the bracket, a negative times a negative is a positive, and 1 times 4 is simply 4. Now, what you discover when you just have a negative sign in front of a bracket is everything in the bracket just switches signs. So that was a positive x, it becomes a negative x. This was a -4, it becomes a positive 4. So that's what happens when you have a negative sign in front of the bracket. Okay, I'm just gonna now copy down or carry down the rest here. So that looks a bit sloppy. We'll get rid of that and try again. That's equals and -5 plus 12. So now we know we have like terms to gather. There's only 2 types of terms you're going to have: variable terms and number terms. So because we've got 4 parts here, we know we can put some things together. Okay, so let's start with our x groups. So 4x and this -1x. So 4 minus 1 is going to give us 3 x's. Okay, put those together. Now we have -6, which is cold, +4, which is hot. Cold being warmed up, that's going to give us -2. All right, we've added our like terms on the left. We're going to see if we have like terms on the right. And again, numbers with numbers. Okay, so cold 5 and hot 12. This cold is going to be warmed up, or you can think of this hot is going to be cooled down. Either way, the answer in the end is in fact going to be +7. You can start using calculators if you feel like you need to with the integers here. We just want to make sure that you're being able to solve, not that you're struggling with how to add integers together. Okay, so now we're down to, in fact, a subtract and a multiply that we need to remove. Remember, we're getting rid of the add and subtract first because that is a subtract 2. We're going to add 2. That means we're going to add 2 to this side, and the subtract 2 add 2 becomes a 0. So now when we bring down what's left, on the left we have 3x. On the right, we're going to have 7 plus 2, which is equal to 9. Now, get rid of the multiply by 3 by dividing by 3. 3 divided by 3 gives us 1. 1x is the same thing as x, and 9 divided by 3 is 3. We've solved it. Okay, last thing for the lesson is that I want us to be able to check a complicated question like that. So again, first step is to just rewrite the equation. So 2 bracket 2x minus 3 minus x subtract 4 is equal to 5, which is negative plus 12. The second step is to substitute our answer in. So we found x was equal to 3, so we're going to substitute that in, and wherever we see an x, we're going to put in that 3. So 2, let's make a big bracket because we know we're going to substitute in those two locations using a smaller bracket. So 2 bracket 3 minus 3, close the bigger bracket, subtract, oh, sorry, I made a mistake there. That should be the bigger bracket. So, sorry. So 2x minus 3, we've just taken the x out, put the 3 in. So 2, 3 in a bracket, minus 3, and then our bigger bracket. Subtract, and then the bigger bracket, use a small bracket for this, 3 minus 4, big bracket is equal to negative 5 plus 12. It does look a bit ominous or difficult here, but just use BEDMAS, right? So BEDMAS says brackets. Here's our first bracket we need to deal with, because remember, we're going to go left to right, and we'll do that one. In the bracket, we follow BEDMAS, so we're going to do our multiply first. So 2 times 3 is 6. Copy down the minus 3. Then 6 minus 3 gives us 3. So we've solved that bracket. Bring down what we have left, a 2 in front of that bracket. And we're going to move on to the next bracket, 3 minus 4, right? Remember that this is like positive 3 and negative 4 being put together. So hot is going to be cooled down by 4. So that's going to give us negative 1. So that's going to subtract negative 1. Now we've done our bracket, and the next is exponent, which we don't have, and then multiply and divide. So we have this multiply to do. 2 times 3 gives us 6, and then 6 is going to minus negative 1. Now this is where it's a little bit tricky, okay? Use your calculator if you have to, but if we have two signs like this, we just want to simplify it by adding the opposite. Remember, even if I erase this, and we look at it again, if we are going to take away a negative, it's actually going to become positive because you're going to get hotter. If you're taking cold away, it's going to get hotter. You get the same idea when you look at it as adding the opposite, right? Now we're going to add positive 1, so that's going to give us positive 7. So the left side is 7. Now we need to work out the right side. A little bit easier. So cold 5, hot 12. So this 12 is going to get cooled down. If you take 5 away from the 12, you end up with 7. And bringing that down, we have 7 on the left and now 7 on the right. We've compared them and they are correct. All right, now move on and work on your assignment, solving equations with brackets. If you need to come back and review through the examples to see if you can solve ones that are similar to the examples that I've given, you can go over that again and again. All right, we'll see you later.